Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown. Today, we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on the second episode of the third season of House of the Dragon. Of course, House of the Dragon being the prequel series to Game of Thrones, that takes place during a time known as the Dance of the Dragons from the books. This breakdown, and all of the other ones as well, will contain spoilers from the source material. So this is your spoiler warning, you have been warned. And the title for episode 2 of the third season being Queen's Landing. Now, before we get started with the actual episode, there are two sides to this war, Team Green and Team Black. If you wish to choose your side and represent them until the very end, feel free to check out our merch made just for you to pick your side in this unforgettable conflict. And remember to use code DRAGON for 25% off your order. Anyways though, this episode begins practically right where the previous episode left off, as we see the destruction and the loss that the Battle of the Gullet brought to the realm, and to both sides of the war, but more so to Team Black. We see a quick shot of the dragon seeds over the gullet as they finish off the remaining Triarchy ships well on their dragons. Now, this is a bit different compared to the source material, as the dragon seeds actually flew into the battle alongside Jacaerys Velaryon. Obviously, this also means that the book character known as Nettles was there with Sheepstealer, who she was able to control without any issues, as Jace was ultimately killed in the book to actually save his brothers rather than a rogue dragon being responsible. Anyways though, we see Baela flying over the gullet as well as she heads back to Dragonstone, as we can see her holding Jacaerys' body on her dragon, Moondancer. When they return to Dragonstone, the Dragon Keepers gather around and carry Jace's body. Sir Laurent approaches and inquires how the battle has ended. Baela tells him that the battle has been won, but again, at what cost? As it was stated in the book, the Velaryon fleet lost almost a third of its strength. Thousands died. Yet none of these losses felt so deeply as that of Jacaerys Velaryon, Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Rhaenyra, now free from being trapped from her own room, is faced with Jacaerys' body being returned to her. At first, Rhaenyra is clearly in denial and hesitant in believing that her other son has been killed off as well. She angrily speaks to his corpse, asking him what he has done, and expecting him to respond to her. This is just a small, little look into what will or what should likely be going into the Mad Queen, or Rhaenyra the Cruel. She eventually snaps out of the anger part and realizes that her firstborn son is truly gone. She breaks down in tears and hugs her son one final time. A very emotional scene, and Emma Darcy has an absolutely incredible performance here. During this whole ordeal, Sir Laurent does try to hold Rhaenyra back, but of course, he participated in locking her in her room, and therefore has somewhat assisted in sending Jace off to his death. So in a scene that reminded me a lot of Sir Eric's sacrifice, Sir Laurent offers Rhaenyra his life. But she says that won't do any good right now and won't bring her son back, so there's no point. She also angrily yells at everyone in the room, saying that they have all betrayed her. We then cut to see more of the aftermath in the Gullet, as Velaryon soldiers finish off what is left of the Triarchy in this area, all while Alan of Hall sails through the water searching for his father, Corlys. We then cut to the Vale as Rhaena has returned from the Gullet with Sheepstealer. She is seeking help from Lady Jane Arryn, as she is partially responsible for Jace's death. Now, obviously, with the absence of Nettles in the series and Rhaena being mixed in with that character, a lot of things will be different when it comes to Rhaena's story now. For example, during this sequence, Lady Jane Eyre is rather angry with Rhaena and doesn't really care to help her out, and attempts to just send her away, as she is meant to be on a boat to Pentos alongside Jace's other brothers, Aegon and Viserys, who were cut from the Battle of the Gullet. So this little line about Pentos is likely them trying to explain that the boys are still heading to Pentos. It's just all happening off screen, which again I do have issue with, but either way though, these two not getting along is also vastly different from the books as well, as Rhaena is basically Jane's spoiled ward, and people made songs about her because of this in the books. And remembering the previous seasons, Jane and Rhaenyra had a bit of a misunderstanding, as Jane had promised her and the Vale's allegiance to Team Black in exchange for a dragon protecting her kingdom. But in reality, she was given Rhaena, Jace's brothers, and a baby dragon. So now that Rhaena has tamed Sheepsealer successfully, she offers that up as the dragon to protect the Vale. Obviously though, someone from Team Black is going to hunt down Rhaena for her and her dragon's involvement in the Gullet. And this is likely going to lead to Daemon actually being a father for once and speaking to his daughter Rhaena. We then cut to Daemon and the joint forces of the North and the Riverlands after the Battle of Red Fork and the Battle by Lakeshore, which were seemingly sort of combined for the show, even though both were not on screen. A moment that seems extremely happy and exciting during a time of pure violence, darkness, and brutality. They celebrate their victory over the Lannister forces, as we can see they have displayed Jason Lannister's head on a spike, alongside the lions that he used in battle. Once again, among these forces are the Winter Wolves, the old northern warriors that Cregan Stark sent north for Team Black, alongside members of House Blackwood and even their rivals, House Bracken. So seeing those two houses celebrate together is a bit of an anomaly. Daemon's forces celebrate, drink, and sing of their victory, mentioning Fish Feed. This was another name for the battle by Lakeshore, which of course was not shown on screen, which again I do think is a bit of a miss, as it was one of the most brutal and action-packed battles that took place during the dance. But maybe they're saving that all for Butcher's Ball and the Battle of Tumbletons. We see the return of Simon Strong, who delivers a message to Daemon. This is the message informing him that the Crown Prince Jacaerys has been killed, and he is now to head back to Dragonstone and then take King's Landing with Rhaenyra. Now, in the books, Daemon was not in either of the previous battles that these forces fought in, but he does send them on their way here, as he plans to meet them in King's Landing sometime down the line. So these forces will be going their own way, and that will lead to a few other major battles, such as the Battle of Butcher's Ball, the Battle of Tumbleton 1 and 2, and the Battle of the King's Road. All, I hope, are done absolute justice on screen, as they are super entertaining in the books. Now, I did touch on them briefly in the previous breakdown, but of course, among these forces are Roderick Dustin, aka Roddy the Ruin, who leads the Winter Wolves, as well as Alicent Blackwood, aka Black Allie. Before Daemon heads back to Dragonstone, we actually see him and Alice Rivers speak one last time, as Alice wants a reward for being responsible for Daemon gaining over 40,000 Rivermen to their side. But of course, Alice has no claims and is a bastard, and Harrenhal belongs to House Strong. no matter how run down that castle is. She wants it because she thinks it constantly ends up in the wrong hands, and apparently she has witnessed almost all of the changing of hands of this castle. I do believe that this is a subtle hint to her being much older than she appears, sort of like Melisandre in Game of Thrones. Because she was denied Harrenhal, she tells Daemon to never return here and to remember what she said to him, which was of course her telling him that he is going to die here. A major foreshadowing to the battle above the God's Eye. We then cut back to the Gullet yet again as Alan of Hull continues to search among the dead for his father Corlys. Baela arrives on Moondancer and meets with Alan. She encourages him a bit and promises him that her grandsire Corlys is alive and he has survived through everything before, so he will survive this. As we can also see Adam of Hull flying over the Gullet on his dragon, Seasmoke, which was also the former dragon of Laenor Velaryon. Adam is also searching for his father, who he does eventually find. Now, in the books, Alan and Baela do eventually get together and get married. Now, it's not because they love each other, it's purely to keep their houses going. However, in the books, their age difference is not as big as it is in the show. Anyways though, later on, we do see Corlys, Baela, Alan, and Adam looking over the Gullet and Driftmark as it burns. Corlys says that if this is victory, he wishes to never see one again. This is a line directly from the books. Corlys cannot give Alan Driftmark anymore. He can only give him his name of Velaryon. But this means much more than a mountain of gold, as that is really all he has ever wanted from his father. We then cut to Aegon and Larys back in the wagon that they were in when captured by members of House Staunton in the previous episode. Their wagon is once again stopped, but this time it's because remnants of the Triarchy have attacked the Staunton forces. This allows Aegon and Larys to escape after Aegon kills one of the guards himself, and Aegon plans on heading to Rook's Rest, the same place that House Staunton used to rule over, and the same place where Rhaenys and Meleys were killed. Aegon has allies there because of Cole's forces capturing it following the Battle of Rook's Rest. Now, this is ultimately going to lead to a sort of switching of places, as Aegon actually plans to head to Dragonstone in the end. We then cut to King's Landing, where we see Alicent watch over the city and Vhagar, who is flying away from it, and right over the Dragon Pit, which is of course in complete ruins by the time of Game of Thrones. And that is a major plot point that we will actually likely see rather soon this season. And that event is known as the Storming of the Dragon Pit. Alicent is preparing everything and making sure she keeps her promise to Rhaenyra, so that there is no further bloodshed when she returns to claim the throne for herself. Alicent meets with the standing commander of the Gold Cloaks, or the City Watch, known as Sir Luther Largent, who had previously served under Daemon Targaryen when he commanded the City Watch. She is seeking his assistance in Rhaenyra's taking of King's Landing to be as peaceful as possible. So in turn, she is basically asking for him and his men to turn on Team Green when the time comes, which was likely to happen in the end either way, as they are all there as Gold Cloaks because of Daemon. Anyways though, her own Kingsguard, Sir Rickard Thorne, ends up informing others of what she has done. And this is what leads into what I thought was only going to be Lord Jasper Wilde confront her about her betrayal, but it ends up with him assaulting Alicent, but thankfully, he is arrested after Maester Orwyl finds him. Heading back to Dragonstone, Daemon returns to find 2 of the 3 dragon seeds, Ulf and Hugh, sitting about. He questions why they are there, as they were ordered to ambush and pursue Aemond and Vhagar in the Riverlands. Hugh explains that Aemond never showed up, but it had only been 2 days. Ulf then tries explaining these strange things that they experienced, only to get backhanded by Daemon. This sort of stuff will likely be part of the reason for what ends up occurring at the Battle of Tumbleton, which is also why Adam is likely not present during these scenes, as he is the most loyal dragon seed. We then see Daemon meet with Mysaria, someone he used to be with, which we saw in the first season of the show, and they discuss Rhaenyra's plans and Alicent's intentions. Once again, Mysaria's accent is sort of going in and out here, but it is not as bad as it was in the first season. Mysaria's story is a lot different compared to the book, as she plays a much more important role in the show, standing as an advisor for Rhaenyra, but seemingly, or most likely, just doing all of this for her own good. She does say that she is no friend of the Hightowers here, however, which calls back to when she gave Otto Hightower information and they still burnt down her establishment. Daemon then meets with Rhaenyra, who is still grieving the death of Jace, of course. He tells her that he died for her and her cause, and questions if she is going to let her sons die in vain, as Vhagar and Aemond have been sighted leaving King's Landing and heading towards the Riverlands. Extremely awful timing, I will say, as the dragon seeds had just left Harrenhal, but Rhaenyra does not want to do anything right now and doesn't think that her son's dying is worth sitting on a throne that is made of swords. A tale we all know, the Iron Throne was created by Aegon the Conqueror and the swords of his enemies, as he had his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, melt them down together to create the iconic throne. Now, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere with getting Rhaenyra ready to take King's Landing for herself. So, Daemon tells her about what he saw back at Harrenhal. The visions of the North, the Song of Ice and Fire, the White Walkers, the Night King, the Long Night, and more importantly, the silver-haired woman that had 3 dragons at her breast. Of course, this is in reference to their future descendant, who we all know, Daenerys Targaryen. This is what motivates her to keep going, because her father, Viserys, told her of this story as well. She suits up and prepares to take King's Landing alongside Daemon. She has a sort of armored dress on and wears Jacaerys' old sword on her hilt, which I thought was a very nice touch. Once again, her own council doubts her and her actions, but Daemon backs her up here. She doesn't have an army with her, but she has Daemon to protect her, and that's all she needs to take the throne. Because, as they say, 6 men or 60, he is still Daemon Targaryen. Now, I did mention this in my previous breakdown, but Lord Bartimos is of House Celtigar, which is also a house that comes from Old Valyria, just like the Targaryens and the Velaryons. But, much like the Velaryons, they were not Dragon Lords. On her way out, Mysaria gives Rhaenyra her crown, as she will be needing it once she sits the throne. She hopes that Rhaenyra will send for her once everything is done, as she has been faithful to her this entire time. Now, of course, Rhaenyra wears the crown of her father, Viserys Targaryen, but it also happens to be the same crown that King Jacaerys the Conciliator wore as well. A very peaceful king. Much in contrast with Aegon wearing the crown that the Conqueror wore during his time, which was then followed by people such as Maegor the Cruel. Anyways though, Rhaenyra and Daemon are taking Hugh and Ulf with them alongside their dragons Vermithor and Silverwing. And while Daemon instructs the 2 dragon seeds on their orders, we can actually see Caraxes and Syrax sort of kissing in the background, so this is basically confirming or hinting at that rumored dragon mate stuff regarding these 2. As the 4 take off, we get this awesome shot of the 4 dragons heading towards King's Landing. Rhaenyra on her longtime dragon Syrax, Daemon on his longtime dragon Caraxes, Ulf the White on Silverwing, the former dragon of Queen Alicent Targaryen, and Hugh Hammer on Vermithor, the former dragon of King Jacaerys Targaryen. We then cut back to King's Landing as Helaena observes some insects outside. Alicent comes to get her as she needs her help in ordering the men to stand down for when Rhaenyra arrives. Now, during this scene, we can see Helena's book open to a page of a butterfly in the background, and I have seen a few posts regarding this, but this literally could be a reference to George's blog post that he wrote about how he disliked the 2nd season of the series, as the blog post was titled "Beware the Butterflies." However, this also technically canonizes the toxic butterflies of Noth for the cinematic universe of Game of Thrones. Anyways though, Alicent and Helaena order the men to stand down as Helaena says that she will not see any beast harmed. She also adds a note that Rhaenyra's sons were always kind, which calls back to when Jace took her to dance, and we saw her at what seemed to actually be her happiest moments on screen. We then cut to the Riverlands as Criston Cole, Gwaine Hightower, and their forces mixed up of Hightower men, alongside others such as House Rosby, observe that of Vhagar and Aemond flying overhead. History repeats itself once more as Vhagar attacks and burns Harrenhal and those around it, much like Balerion did back during Aegon the Conqueror's rule. Aemond storms Harrenhal, cutting down anyone who gets in his way, as he dual wields the Blackfire Blade, the former blade of the Conquerors, and the Valyrian steel dagger that ends up in Arya Stark's hands in Game of Thrones. A major contrast to when Daemon took Harrenhal, as he did so quietly and swiftly with much less bloodshed. Aemond confronts Simon Strong and says that he is seeking Daemon Targaryen, who is of course not there. So he tells Simon to draw his sword, as he hopes for a duel. But Simon is old and does not have a sword to wield, so he tries to peacefully speak to Aemond here, only to be stabbed and killed without mercy, in front of his 2 sons, who are also killed by Aemond directly after. However, before one of them is killed, he is able to actually stab Aemond, leaving him injured and pleading for help from none other than Alice Rivers. This will lead into a lasting relationship between the 2, but hopefully that does not mean getting a ton of episodes where Aemond starts getting constant visions like Daemon had. In the books, Simon's death was actually much more brutal. As it was described, the duel that followed was utterly one-sided. All the accounts agree. The prince cut the old man to pieces, then fed his corpse to Vhagar. Finally, cutting back to King's Landing as Rhaenyra and her dragons arrive to take what is rightfully hers. The guards open the gates and surrender as she arrives on Syrax, as her other dragons fly over the city. We can see that of Hugh Hammer's wife, who he practically left, spot Vermithor overhead, as well as Ulf's old drinking buddies spot Silverwing overhead. The guards at the gates may have surrendered, but the true test lies within the Red Keep. So as Rhaenyra and her sole protector, Daemon, walk through the halls, Daemon cuts down any man who wishes to stand in their way, and he does it with ease, up until they make it into the throne room. where they are stopped by Sir Rickard Thorne and other Hightower soldiers. They are completely outnumbered, but this does not stop Daemon from being ready to fight. But Rhaenyra also draws her sword and is ready to fight alongside him. But out of nowhere, a massive number of gold cloaks rush into the room and it appears that they are surrounded. But if you remember the past, the gold cloaks followed Daemon first. And that is who they recognize here, as Sir Luther Largent states that they recognize their commander, Daemon Targaryen, and the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms, Rhaenyra Targaryen. He does this because Daemon is the one that gave him his gold cloak 20 years ago. This happens differently in the books, as Gwaine Hightower is actually present in King's Landing and was ordered to keep an eye on everything, especially because they did not exactly trust Luther Largent or the Gold Cloaks. So when this occurs, Gwaine confronts Luther Largent, who tells him, "Daemon gave us these cloaks, and they're gold no matter which way you turn them." And then he killed Gwaine in this moment. But seeing that Gwaine Hightower is not present and is in the Riverlands with Criston Cole, his character will obviously meet a completely different fate. Anyways though, all of this causes Rickard and his men to surrender and then be arrested. However, in the books, Rickard Thorne is actually ordered to flee the city and get to Old Town with Aegon and Helena's other child, Maelor Targaryen. But he is brutally killed by a mob at Bitterbridge on his way out of King's Landing, and so is the child. However, Maelor Targaryen is not in the series, so I am unsure what Rickard's end will be for the show. Before Rhaenyra can take the throne for herself, she orders them to bring Aegon, the usurper, to her. But of course, he has fled alongside Larys Strong. But Maester Orwyl offers another person to meet the sword, and that is Lord Jasper Wilde. However, while down in the cells, Daemon is brought yet another gift, apparently from Larys Strong, and that ends up being Otto Hightower himself, Alicent's father, who we have not seen since he was mysteriously captured after losing his role as Hand in the previous season. The two are brought before Rhaenyra, and Otto believes that everyone else is likely to be dead then. So he scoffs at how Viserys would react if he saw how this has all gone, which is a bit ironic because this all happened because of Otto pushing for Aegon to be king instead. Daemon hands Rhaenyra his blade, known as Dark Sister, the former sword of Visenya Targaryen, the sister wife of Aegon the Conqueror, as Rhaenyra is to behead Otto herself and set herself up as a true ruler. She misses the first strike because she's never killed anyone before, making Otto's death rather brutal and painful. But she successfully kills him with the second strike, followed by Daemon snatching Dark Sister and also beheading Jasper Wilde mid-sentence. Good riddance, if I must say. After which, Rhaenyra slowly makes her way to the Iron Throne, leaving a trail of bloody footsteps behind her. As she sits down, clearly filled with sadness more than anything, with what this show has given and sort of shaped to be, I do think that this change fits, as it is actually quite different in the book, as when she sits the throne, she is actually filled with anger and rage, fulfilling that sort of Rhaenyra the Cruel title. So much so that it was said that when she sat down for the very first time on the Iron Throne, she was so angry that she ended up cutting her own arm on the chair. Anyways though, after finally claiming what is rightfully hers, Alicent and Helena are captured while trying to flee the city with Jacaerys and brought before Rhaenyra, only for Alicent to witness her father dead on the floor in front of her, which of course was not a part of her deal with Rhaenyra. But neither was the Triarchy ambushing in the Gullet, and neither was Dace's death, which again comes from all of these changes from the books and there being more misunderstandings than actual deception and war. But the episode ends off as the two come face to face once again, and more than likely heading into being enemies again. And overall, I actually enjoyed this episode quite a bit. There's obviously a few changes here and there in this one compared to the source material, but I was not put off by them as much as I was with the changes from the previous episode or the previous season. This episode sort of felt like where the show used to be when it was at its absolute best. And let me tell you, the acting performances in this one were absolutely incredible and mind-blowingly good, especially from Emma Darcy. They did such an amazing job and brought so much emotion to the screen, especially with the scenes with Jacaerys. The visuals were also beautiful in this one, especially with all of the dragons. They looked incredible. And the action was also great. Seeing Daemon cut down soldiers like that and have him display his skill was super cool. I think I may have actually enjoyed this episode more than the first one. Of course, I have small issues here and there because of the certain story changes when in comparison to the source material, as I have said before, but that really didn't leave a sour taste for this episode. And this one was a great watch. If I had to rate the episode, I think I would give it an easy 9.5 out of 10. But yeah, that about does it for this episode, from me at least. But of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on the episode as well, so make sure to leave them down below. With that being said, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, don't forget to give it a like. And with that, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the Nerdy Multiverse.